She stood in the corner of the ballroom, champagne bottle in hand, watching the man who destroyed her life kiss his new bride under a cascade of rose petals. 3 years ago, he left her with nothing but debt and shame. Tonight, she wasn't there to celebrate. She was there to collect. And by the time the night ended, everyone in that room would know exactly who Gavin Mitchell really was. The Grandview Hotel ballroom glittered like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light across tables draped in silk, each centerpiece a tower of white orchids that probably cost more than most people's rent. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner while 200 guests in designer suits and evening gowns clinked glasses and laughed, their voices echoing off the marble floors. It was the kind of wedding that made it into society pages, the kind that announced you'd arrived. And there, weaving between tables with a silver tray of champagne flutes, was a woman nobody really noticed. She wore the same black vest and white shirt as the other servers, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, her makeup understated. To the guests, she was just part of the scenery, someone to hand them drinks and disappear. But if anyone had looked closely, really looked, they might have seen something in her eyes. Something patient, something waiting. Her name was Claire Santos, and she had every reason to be anywhere else on earth that night. Anywhere except the wedding of the man who once promised to marry her. What she carried wasn't just champagne. It was 4 years of carefully gathered truth. And tonight, under those golden lights, that truth was about to shatter everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 4 years earlier, Claire had been a different person entirely. She was 28, working as an event coordinator at a boutique firm in downtown Portland, and she was good at it. Really good. She had an eye for detail that her clients loved, a way of taking someone's vague dream and turning it into reality. She worked 12-hour days without complaint, saved every dollar she could, and had a business plan folded in her desk drawer. One day, she told herself she'd open her own event planning company. One day, she'd be the boss. That's when she met Gavin Mitchell. He walked into her office on a Tuesday afternoon in March, needing someone to plan a corporate gala for his tech startup. He was 32, handsome in that clean-cut way that screamed confidence, with a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He wore expensive watches and tailored suits, drove a Tesla, and talked about disrupting industries like it was the easiest thing in the world. If only she'd known that every word he spoke was part of a performance he'd perfected on at least 2 other women before her. Claire had coordinated plenty of events for successful men before, but Gavin was different. He didn't just tell her what he wanted. He asked her opinion. He listened. He stayed after their meetings to chat about her dreams, her plans, her life. Within 3 weeks, he asked her to dinner. Within 3 months, they were inseparable. Gavin made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. He showed up at her apartment with flowers, took her to restaurants she couldn't afford, introduced her to his friends and business partners like she mattered. When she mentioned wanting to start her own company, he didn't laugh or tell her to be realistic. He said, "You're going to be amazing. I'll help you. We'll do it together." And in that moment, she had no idea that the man she loved was already calculating exactly how much she was worth to him. 8 months after they met, he proposed. They were at a vineyard in Napa Valley, the sun setting over rows of grapevines, and when he got down on one knee with a diamond ring, Claire cried so hard she could barely say yes. She called her mother that night, her voice shaking with happiness. She thought she'd found her person. She thought she'd won. But slowly, things began to change. It wasn't obvious at first. Gavin started making small comments about her work. "You're staying late again? You know, you don't have to prove yourself so hard." Or, "That dress is nice, but maybe something more elegant for the investor dinner." He had opinions about her friends, too. Her college roommate Jessica was dramatic. Her coworker Mark was unprofessional. One by one, Claire found herself seeing them less, making excuses, prioritizing Gavin. He told her it was because he wanted them to build something together, just the two of them. He said it was because he loved her too much to share her. And she believed him. What she didn't realize was that isolation was part of the plan. The fewer people she had in her life, the easier she'd be to control. Because when things were good with Gavin, they were so good. He'd surprise her with weekend trips, write her long emails about their future, hold her like she was the most precious thing in the world. So she ignored the tightness in her chest when he criticized her. She told herself he was just trying to help her grow. Then, 6 months before their wedding, Gavin came to her with a business opportunity. His startup was expanding, and he needed capital. There was an investor willing to back him, but the deal required a personal guarantee, a co-signer on a business loan. He looked at her across the table at their favorite Italian restaurant, his hand covering hers, his voice soft. I know it's a lot to ask, but we're building a life together, right? What's mine is yours. I just need you to trust me. Claire hesitated. It was $200,000. But Gavin was her fiancé. They were getting married. And if only she'd known that by signing those papers, she wasn't building a future, she was funding her own destruction. She signed. 3 months later, the company started having problems. Gavin stayed late at the office, came home exhausted, stopped talking about the future. When Claire asked what was wrong, he snapped at her. You wouldn't understand. You plan parties. This is real business. She tried to be supportive. She cooked his favorite meals, gave him space, told herself it was just stress. Then, 2 weeks before their wedding, everything fell apart. Claire came home from work to find Gavin's apartment half empty. His clothes were gone. His laptop. The photos of them on the wall had been taken down, the nails still sticking out like tiny wounds. On the kitchen counter was a single envelope with her name on it. Inside was a note, handwritten on his expensive stationery. Claire, I can't do this. You're a good person, but you're not ready for my world. I need someone who can keep up. I'm sorry. That was it. No explanation. No phone call. No goodbye. She tried calling him for 3 days straight. Every call went to voicemail. She went to his office, but the receptionist told her he was out of town. She called his friends, but they all gave her the same vague response. He just needs time. You know how he is. 2 weeks later, Claire got the first call from a creditor. The business loan Gavin had taken out, the one she'd co-signed, was in default. The investor had pulled out. The company was bankrupt. And because her name was on the paperwork, she was liable. $200,000. She tried to reach Gavin, tried to get him to explain, to help, to do something. But he had vanished completely. No forwarding address. No response. It was like he'd erased her from his life with the efficiency of deleting an email. The debt collectors didn't care about her broken heart. They wanted their money. Claire's savings, the money she'd been putting away for her business, disappeared in the first few payments. Then her credit cards maxed out. Then the letters started coming, threatening legal action. She had to move out of her apartment into a cheaper place with 2 roommates. She picked up a second job, waitressing on weekends. The business plan in her desk drawer stayed folded. Every month was just about surviving. Her mother called every week, worried. Come home, she'd say. Let us help you. But Claire was too ashamed. She'd ignored every warning sign. She'd been so sure Gavin loved her. How could she admit she'd been that wrong? If you're still watching, comment, I'm still here. Let's see how many of us are following Claire's journey till the end. Then, 8 months after he disappeared, Claire saw the engagement announcement online. Gavin Mitchell, founder and CEO, engaged to Victoria Harrington, daughter of real estate mogul Thomas Harrington. The photo showed them on a yacht, Gavin's arm around a blonde woman in a white sundress, both of them smiling like they'd never known a single hard day. Claire stared at that photo for a long time. She read the comments. Beautiful couple. He's such a catch. Goals. Nobody knew. Nobody cared. She was a ghost in his story, a footnote he'd already erased. That night, Claire sat on her bathroom floor and cried until she couldn't breathe. But somewhere in that grief, something else emerged. A cold, clear anger. Gavin had used her. He'd manipulated her, isolated her, taken everything she had, and walked away like it meant nothing. And now he was getting married in front of 200 people like he was some kind of prize. She couldn't let that stand. She wouldn't. Over the next 18 months, Claire became someone new. She paid off her debt slowly, painfully, working 3 jobs and sleeping 5 hours a night. She cut her spending to almost nothing. Rice and beans. No coffee shops. No movies. Nothing unnecessary. But she also started digging. She spent her free hours researching Gavin's business history, combing through public records, reaching out to former employees of his failed startup. She created fake email accounts and joined alumni groups, pretending to be a potential investor interested in his new ventures. And what she found made her sick. Gavin's company hadn't just failed. He'd deliberately run into the ground. He'd taken the investors' money and funneled it into personal accounts. He'd used Claire's signature to cover fraudulent expenses, knowing she'd never think to check. When the company collapsed, he walked away clean while she drowned in the consequences. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he'd done it before, to at least 2 other women. Different cities, different names, same pattern. Romance, manipulation, financial devastation, disappearance. And every time, he resurfaced somewhere new with a shinier life and a richer girlfriend. He was a con artist in a nice suit, and nobody had ever stopped him. Claire spent 6 months building her case. She found bank records, email trails, recordings of phone calls from former business partners who'd also been burned. She contacted a lawyer who agreed to take her case pro bono after hearing her story. She compiled everything into a single, damning file. But she didn't go to the police. Not yet, because Claire had learned something important in those 2 years. The system protected men like Gavin. Rich, charming, connected men who knew how to smile and deflect. If she took him to court, it would take years, cost money she didn't have, and probably end with him settling quietly while admitting no wrongdoing. She wanted more than justice. She wanted him to feel what she'd felt. Exposed, humiliated, destroyed. So when Claire saw the job posting for event staff at the Grandview Hotel, the same venue where Gavin's wedding was scheduled, she applied immediately. She used her maiden name, listed her catering experience, and showed up to the interview with a smile and impeccable references. They hired her on the spot. Nobody recognized her. Why would they? The Claire who'd been engaged to Gavin Mitchell wore designer dresses and had manicured nails and went to charity galas. This Claire wore a cheap uniform and served drinks and blended into the background. She was invisible, and invisible was exactly what she needed to be. 3 weeks before the wedding, Claire reached out to one person from Gavin's past. Marcus Chun, a former business partner who'd lost his entire retirement fund when Gavin's startup collapsed. Marcus had tried to sue but couldn't afford to keep fighting. When Claire sent him the evidence she'd compiled, his response was immediate. "What do you need from me?" "Just be at the wedding," Claire wrote back, "and be ready to confirm what I show them." The night of the wedding, Claire arrived 2 hours early. She set up tables, arranged glasses, checked the sound system. She was professional, polite, forgettable. When the guests started arriving, she moved through the crowd with her tray, offering champagne and smiling blandly when people ignored her. She watched Gavin greet his guests, his arm around Victoria, his laugh loud and confident. He looked exactly the same. Same expensive suit, same charming smile, same way of making everyone around him feel important. And when he saw Claire, he didn't even recognize her. She walked right past him with a tray of drinks, and his eyes slid over her like she was furniture. That should have hurt. But instead, Claire felt calm, because tonight, everything was going to change. The reception moved smoothly. Dinner was served, speeches were made, the bride and groom had their first dance. Claire waited. She knew the schedule. She'd coordinated enough weddings to know exactly when the open mic portion would begin, when guests were invited to share toasts and stories about the couple. That was her window. As the best man finished his speech and handed the microphone to the DJ, Claire stepped forward. She timed it perfectly. The DJ, a young guy who barely looked up from his equipment, handed her the mic without question. Why wouldn't he? She was staff. She probably had an announcement about dessert or the after-party. Claire walked to the center of the dance floor, the microphone in her hand, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. 200 faces turned toward her. Gavin looked confused. Victoria smiled politely, probably expecting some kind of hotel announcement. She looked at the crowd. The air thickened. The jazz had stopped. Someone set down a fork and the clink echoed across marble. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Then Claire spoke. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Claire Santos, and I need to tell you something about the groom." The room went very quiet. Gavin's face shifted from confusion to recognition to panic in the span of 3 seconds. He started to stand, but his new father-in-law, Thomas Harrington, put a hand on his shoulder. "Wait," the gesture said. "Let's hear this." Claire kept her voice steady, calm, like she was giving a presentation at work. 4 years ago, I met Gavin Mitchell. He was charming, successful, and he made me believe we were building a future together. He proposed to me. I said yes. And then, 2 weeks before our wedding, he asked me to co-sign a business loan for $200,000. I trusted him. I signed. She could see people exchanging glances. Whispers starting. 2 weeks before our wedding, Gavin disappeared. No explanation. No contact. Just a note saying I wasn't ready for his world. And then I found out his company had collapsed. The loan I'd co-signed was in default. I lost everything. My savings. My apartment. My dream of starting my own business. I spent 2 years paying off debt for a company that Gavin deliberately destroyed. Gavin was on his feet now, his face red. "This is insane. Security, get her out of here." But Thomas Harrington held up his hand. "Let her finish." Victoria was staring at Gavin, her expression frozen. Claire continued. "At first, I thought I was just unlucky, that I'd fallen for the wrong man. But then I started digging, and I found out I wasn't the first. Before me, there was Rachel Nguyen in San Francisco. Before her, Amy Delgado in Seattle. Same pattern. Romance, engagement, financial manipulation, disappearance. Gavin Mitchell is a con artist. He finds women with good credit and trusting hearts, uses them to fund his lifestyle, and leaves them buried in debt while he moves on to the next victim." The room erupted. People talking over each other, some standing, some pulling out phones. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. "That's enough," Gavin shouted. "She's lying. She's a scorned ex who can't move on." Claire reached in her vest pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. She held it up for everyone to see. "This contains bank records, emails, and recorded conversations that prove everything I just said. I've already sent copies to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. But I wanted you all to know first. I wanted you to see who you're celebrating tonight." She turned to look at Gavin directly. "You told me I wasn't ready for your world. You were right, because your world is built on lies, and I refuse to live there." Then she walked over to the wedding coordinator, a stressed-looking woman in a headset, and handed her the flash drive. "Please connect this to the projector." The coordinator looked at Thomas Harrington, who nodded. 30 seconds later, the enormous LED screen behind the head table, which had been showing a slideshow of Victoria and Gavin's engagement photos, went dark. Then documents began to appear. Bank transfers, emails where Gavin instructed his accountant to move money into offshore accounts, text messages to a former employee telling him to forge Claire's signature on additional paperwork, a recorded phone call where Gavin laughed about how easy it was to get these girls to trust you. The room was in chaos now. Victoria stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "Is this true?" Her voice was shaking. Gavin tried to approach her, his hands up in surrender. "Vicky, listen to me. This is all taken out of context. She's manipulating you." But Thomas Harrington was already on his phone, his face like stone. Within minutes, 3 men in suits appeared. Hotel security and, Claire realized, Thomas's personal lawyers. Claire didn't stay to watch the collapse. She set the microphone down on a table, walked through the side door the staff used, and left the building. Her hands were shaking as she stepped into the cool night air, but she felt lighter than she had in years. Behind her, she could hear shouting, the sound of chairs scraping, the wedding falling apart. By the time the last champagne glass hit the floor, Gavin's empire was already dust. 2 days later, the story broke in the news. Portland businessman under investigation for financial fraud. The FBI had taken Claire's evidence seriously. Gavin's accounts were frozen. His new company, the one he'd started with Victoria's father's money, was under audit. Former employees and ex-girlfriends started coming forward with their own stories. Rachel Nguyen gave an interview where she cried, describing how Gavin had left her homeless. Amy Delgado shared emails that proved he'd used her identity to open credit cards. The facade didn't just crack, it shattered. Victoria called off the wedding and filed a lawsuit. Thomas Harrington released a statement saying he'd been deceived and was cooperating fully with authorities. Gavin hired an expensive lawyer and tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. 6 months later, he was arrested. The trial took another 8 months. Claire had to testify, had to sit in a courtroom and describe every detail of how he'd manipulated her. It was brutal. Gavin's lawyer tried to paint her as vindictive, obsessed, a woman scorned who'd fabricated evidence. But the jury didn't buy it. They'd seen the documents. They'd heard from the other victims. They understood exactly who Gavin Mitchell was. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. When the verdict was read, Claire didn't smile. She just looked down at her hands, the same hands that once signed her ruin, now trembling with quiet freedom. For the first time in 4 years, she could finally breathe. The restitution payments would take time, but they were coming. The other victims would get some of their money back too. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase what he'd done, but it was something. It was justice. 1 year after Gavin's sentencing, Claire stood in the doorway of a small office space in downtown Portland. The sign on the window read, "Santos Events, where your story becomes reality." It had taken everything to get here. The restitution money had helped, but she'd also worked 3 jobs for another 6 months to save enough for the deposit. She'd built a website herself, reached out to old contacts, done free consultations to build her portfolio. And slowly, painfully, her business grew. Her first client was a woman planning her daughter's quinceañera. Her second was a couple who wanted a small, intimate wedding. Nothing fancy. Nothing like the Grandview Ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and society page coverage. But they were real. They trusted her. And she delivered. Within a year, Santos Events had a waiting list. Claire hired 2 assistants. She moved into a bigger office. She started getting featured in local blogs and magazines. Not because of the scandal, which she refused to discuss publicly, but because she was genuinely talented at what she did. She had an eye for detail, a way of making people feel heard. Her clients loved her. On a cold evening in November, Claire locked up her office and walked to her car. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, her college roommate she'd reconnected with after everything fell apart. "Drinks tomorrow? I want to hear about the Harper wedding. Heard it was gorgeous." Claire smiled and typed back, "Absolutely." 7 worked. As she drove home, the radio played softly, and she thought about the girl she'd been 4 years ago. The one who thought love meant making yourself smaller. The one who'd signed away her future because she was too afraid to seem untrusting. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who knew her worth. Someone who'd learned that real strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up, dusting yourself off, and building something better from the ruins. Gavin Mitchell served 4 years of his sentence before being released on parole. He moved to a different state, worked a series of low-level jobs, and stayed out of the public eye. The last Claire heard, he was managing a storage facility in Nevada. She didn't think about him much anymore. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with the quiet knowledge that she'd done what needed to be done. People asked her sometimes if it had been worth it. The planning, the risk, the exposure. Standing in front of 200 strangers and reliving the worst period of her life. She always said the same thing.
It wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth, and the truth is always worth telling.
Because here's what Claire learned. Predators like Gavin rely on silence. They count on shame, keeping their victims quiet. They move through life, leaving destruction behind them, because they know most people won't fight back. But when you take away the silence, when you shine a light on what they've done, their power disappears. They're just small, frightened men hiding behind expensive suits and charming smiles. And they can't survive exposure. Claire built her life back brick by brick. She found her voice. She reclaimed her story. And she made sure that every other woman Gavin had hurt knew they weren't alone. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's survival. That's strength. So here's the question for you. If you were in Claire's position, if someone took everything from you and walked away like it meant nothing, what would you do? Would you stay silent? Would you move on and let them win? Or would you stand up, no matter how scared you were, and make sure the world knew the truth? And if you knew someone like Gavin, Someone charming and successful who seemed too good to be true. Would you look closer? Would you ask questions? Would you trust your instincts when something felt wrong? Because the truth is, people like Gavin exist everywhere. They're in boardrooms and coffee shops and dating apps. They're good at what they do, but they're only powerful as long as we stay quiet. Let us know in the comments what you think. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who wronged you? How did you find the strength? We read every comment, and your story might help someone else who's struggling right now. And if this story moved you, if it made you think or feel something real, please share it. Subscribe so you never miss our next video. Because everyone deserves to know they're not alone. Everyone deserves to know their voice matters. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth always finds a way to come out. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to speak it first.